In 1812, the United States and Great Britain were once again at war due to trading disputes, opposing military alliances, and lingering animosity caused by the American Revolution. But during the peak of the conflict, in late 1814, Great Britain attempted to dishearten the United States by invading its capital, Washington, D.C. On August 19, 1814, the British sailed into Chesapeake Bay and landed at Benedict, Maryland. 5,000 troops marched towards the American capital. Upon hearing this, American General William Winder led 7,000 inexperienced troops to meet the British. But they were crushed at the Battle of Bladensburg, which opened a clear path for the British to march on Washington. The American High Command became aware of the plot to occupy the capital. And on August 24th, Dolly Madison, the wife of President James Madison, received an urgent message from her husband to flee the area. She loaded up some wagons with priceless items, including some of our most precious documents, like the original drafts of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the famous Lansdowne portrait of George Washington. She frantically escaped the presidential mansion just as British Admiral George Cockburn and his troops swarmed the city. Cockburn ordered the city to be set ablaze. America's capital was now on fire. The Capitol building, the Library of Congress, and even the White House were engulfed in flames. By the next day, the city was in a state of chaos as residents took shelter from the wrath of the British troops. But the rampaging troops were unaware that they were in the path of destruction and that their military campaign was about to come to an abrupt end. Above the British troops and American citizens, the winds began to shift. The skies became dark and ominous, and heavy rain began to fall upon the raging fires across the city. A sudden and violent twister was bearing down on the capital. Buildings ripped from their foundations, trees tore from their roots, and falling debris littered the streets. The British troops desperately sought shelter, but nothing could save them from their grim fate. One officer reported that cannons were being tossed around by the powerful winds. The tornado ravaged the city and inflicted heavy damage on the British Army. As the storm subsided, survivors emerged from their shelters and were stunned by the degree of devastation leveled upon the city. One British officer pulled aside a resident and asked, "Great God, madam, is this the kind of storm to which you are accustomed to in this infernal country?" The woman replied, "No, sir. This is a special interposition of Providence to drive our enemies from the city." Whether it was by sheer coincidence or divine intervention, the storm had saved the capital, and the British, battered and broken, retreated to their ships. President James Madison and the First Lady returned to the city on August 27th, and eventually a peace treaty between the two nations was signed. Washington, D.C. was rebuilt from the ground up, and some of those historic structures that were saved still stand today. In their two wars with Great Britain, the Americans had one distinct advantage. They were conditioned to their environment, and the British were not. During the Revolutionary War, the volatile American climate and intense weather time and time again returned the advantage in their favor. And in the War of 1812, when their capital was under siege and surrender seemed imminent, a sudden whirlwind rose up and doused a burning city, driving out an occupying force and preserving our nation's history.